The letter came on a Tuesday, slipped under my door like a coward's whisper. The HOA's red ink stamp bled through the envelope, and I knew before tearing it open, Karen was at it again. Cease and desist all attempts to dig a well on your property. It read, signed with her looping, self-righteous signature. Karen Mitchell, president of the Sunny Acres Homeowners Association, had been gunning for me since I bought this dusty patch of Texas ranch land. My dream was simple: dig a well, grow my own food, live free. But Karen, she saw my every move as a personal affront to her manicured empire of cul-de-sacs and identical mailboxes. I crumpled the letter, the paper's sharp edges biting my palms, and stared out at the cracked earth beyond my porch. The air smelled of dry sage and diesel from a distant highway. This wasn't just about water. This was war. I'd moved to Sunny Acres a year ago, fleeing the city's chokehold of noise and neon. Out here, 30 miles from nowhere, I wanted space to breathe, to sink roots into soil that answered to me. Not a landlord. My ranch was Modesto weathered barn, a sagging fence, 10 acres of scrubland begging for life. The plan was to dig a well, irrigate crops, maybe even raise a few goats. But the HOA, led by Karen's iron fist, had rules. Rules about grass height, paint colors, and apparently wells. Unsightly. She'd called my plan at the last meeting, her voice dripping with that fake sweet drawl she used to mask her venom. We can't have industrial equipment ruining the aesthetic. Aesthetic. This was a desert masquerading as a suburb, and her community was a grid of cookie-cutter houses nobody could afford to water. I tried reasoning at first. I showed up to meetings, hat in hand, citing Texas water lawmy land, my groundwater, my rights. Karen didn't care. She'd lean forward, her pearl earrings glinting under fluorescent lights, and say, "We're a community, Mr. Hayes. We make decisions together." Together meant her way or no way. The board, a gaggle of her loyalists, nodded like bobbleheads. I'd leave those meetings smelling her lavender perfume clinging to my shirt, my jaw tight enough to crack walnuts. The well ban was her latest power trip. My land sat over an aquifer, a liquid lifeline under the parched earth. I'd hired a geologist, got permits, even paid for a surveyor to prove the well wouldn't touch the HOA's precious communal supply. Didn't matter. Karen rallied her minions, claiming my well would disrupt the ecosystem or some nonsense she'd Googled. The truth, she hated that I didn't bow, that I didn't mow my lawn on her schedule or paint my barn her approved shade of beige. So she weaponized the HOA's bylaws. And now here I was, staring at her letter, the words legal action burning into my retinas. I wasn't built for surrender. My dad, a roughneck who'd wrestled oil rigs in the Permian Basin, taught me one thing: you don't let a bully take what's yours. I tossed the letter into a drawer and grabbed my phone, dialing Jake, my old high school buddy turned lawyer. His voice crackled through, warm as a campfire. Karen again. Man, she's got a vendetta bigger than Texas. I laughed, but it was hollow, like the clink of an empty whiskey glass. Jake dug into the HOA's contract, and what he found made my blood hum, a loophole. The HOA's water supply relied on a shared easement running through my property. My land, my leverage. That night, I sat on my porch, the stars sharp as pinpricks above. Crickets chirped, their rhythm syncing with my pulse. I sipped coffee gone cold, the mug's ceramic chill grounding me. Karen thought she could starve me out, keep my land dry as her heart. She didn't know me, didn't know the fire she'd lit. I wasn't just fighting for a well. I was fighting for every inch of freedom she'd tried to choke. The next morning, I called a contractor. Not for a well, for something bigger. Can you reroute a water line? I asked, voice steady but my gut churning like a storm. The guy, a grizzled type named Hank with a beard like steel wool, grinned. You're stirring up trouble, ain't ya? I nodded, and he laughed, a sound like gravel under tires. We spent days mapping the easement, tracing pipes that snaked from the county's main line through my land to the HOA's reservoir. Karen's kingdom depended on my dirt. By Friday, Hank's crew had a plan: cut the line, cap it, and redirect my share to a new holding tank. Legal. Barely. Satisfying. Hell yes. But then came the curveball. Hank's crew unearthed something while digging, an old survey marker. Rusted but legible, showing my property line extended 50 feet further than the HOA's records claimed. 50 feet that included part of their precious reservoir. I stood there, boots sinking into the churned-up earth. The smell of damp clay thick in my nose. My land wasn't just a choke point, it was the key to their whole dam system. I could have hooped. But instead, I sighed, long and slow, the weight of what came next settling like dust. I didn't tell Karen. Not yet. I let her stew. Let her think her letter had scared me silent. She'd strut through the neighborhood in her pristine white sneakers, barking at kids for skateboarding, at dogs for barking, at me for existing. I'd wave from my porch, a smile sharp as a switchblade, and she'd falter, her lips pursing like she'd sucked a lemon. She didn't know the storm coming. A week later, I made my move. At dawn, Hank's crew cut the easement line. The sound was glorious, a hiss, then a gurgle, like the earth itself was exhaling. By noon, the HOA's reservoir was dropping, and Karen's phone was blowing up. I got the call while splitting firewood, the axe's thud echoing my heartbeat. "Mr. Hayes," she screeched, her voice shrill through the speaker. "What have you done?" I leaned on the axe, sweat stinging my eyes, and said, "Just exercising my property rights." "Karen," she sputtered, "threatened lawsuits." But I hung up, the silence sweeter than any song. The neighborhood turned into a circus. Sprinklers coughed and died. Lawns yellowed. Karen's prized rose garden wilted, petals curling like her dreams of control. At the emergency HOA meeting, she stood at the podium, her face red as the clay I'd dug up. "This is sabotage," she yelled, pointing at me. The room buzzed, neighbors whispering, some angry, some amused. I stood, slow and deliberate, and dropped the bomb, the survey marker. "Your reservoir's on my land," I said, sliding the old map across the table. "And your water runs through my pipes." The room went quiet, the kind of quiet that hums with shock. Karen's mouth opened, closed, like a fish drowning in air. Jake was there, ready with the legal hammer. "The HOA's easement is invalid," he said, voice smooth as bourbon. "Mr. Hayes can claim full control of the water line and the reservoir land." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen's eyes darted, searching for an ally. But even her loyalists shifted in their seats, smelling defeat. I leaned back, the chair creaking under me, and let the moment burn. She tried to fight, filed an injunction, called in a fancy lawyer from Austin. But the survey marker was ironclad, and Texas law doesn't mess around with property rights. The court ruled in my favor 2 weeks later. I didn't just keep my well, I took their water rights. The HOA's reservoir was mine, and I let it sit, dry as bone, while I dug my well. The drill's roar was music, the earth yielding water like a long-held secret. I stood by the rig, the mist of fresh groundwater cool on my skin, and breathed deep. Freedom smelled like wet dirt and victory. Karen's fall was quiet but brutal. The HOA collapsed without water leverage. Neighbors turned on her, blaming her for pushing me too far. Her house went up for sale, the sign crooked in her browning lawn. I saw her once, packing her SUV, her pearl earrings gone, her face etched with lines I hadn't noticed before. She looked at me, and I expected venom. Instead, she sighed, a small, broken sound, and drove away. I didn't gloat. Didn't need to. The land was mine. The water was mine. And the fight had carved something new in me, a reminder that freedom isn't given. It's taken. I sit on my porch now, a year later, the well pumping steady. My crops are green. My goats bleat in the distance. And the air carries the sweet tang of sagebrush after rain. The neighborhood's quieter without Karen's reign. Folks tending their own gardens, learning to live with less control. I sip my coffee, the mug warm in my hands, and watch the sunrise paint the sky in fire and gold. The fight wasn't just about water. It was about standing up, about carving your place in a world that wants to fence you in. And out here, under this big Texas sky, I'm free.